My life was full of misfortune. I married a husband, Ethan, who had no car, no house, and a debt of $100 million. On New Year's Eve, we couldn't even afford dumplings filled with chives and eggs. Debt collectors stood outside our door, yelling with paint buckets in hand, demanding repayment. My dinner that night was bitter tears. My best friend Lily had a blessed life. She married Jason, the heir of the wealthy Clark family. She lived in a mansion, drove luxury cars, and even the food thrown in their trash cans included untouched bird's nest soup and lobster. Everyone mocked me for being just a pretty face without a brain, for marrying someone like Ethan. They said I deserved all my suffering while praising Lily for her beauty and wisdom in marrying the right person. But 10 years later, Ethan became the richest man in the capital, showering me with love and devotion. I rose to become the happiest and most enviable socialite wife in the elite circle. Meanwhile, my dear friend Lily became the victim of Jason's indulgent lifestyle, contracting an incurable disease. Eventually, she was sold to a shady operation in Southeast Asia and tragically died in a foreign land. Ethan and I spent a fortune to bring her body back for a proper burial. However, Jason, fearing his crimes would be exposed, rammed our car off a cliff. When I opened my eyes again, I had been reborn to the day Ethan and Jason both proposed to Lily and me. But this time, Ethan's proposal was directed at Lily. Just like in my previous life, Ethan appeared in front of us holding a bouquet of flowers and a diamond ring. My heart brimmed with joy as I eagerly awaited him to propose to me again. But to my shock, he knelt on one knee in front of Lily and said, "Lily, I've loved you for 8 years. Will you marry me?" I stood frozen in place, my mind blank. Before I could process what was happening, Lily had already accepted with delight. Her answer didn't surprise me. After all, Lily and I had been best friends for years, and Ethan and Jason were college roommates. The four of us had always been close, sharing mutual admiration. Lily and I had even privately agreed that we wouldn't let our friendship be ruined by love. Whoever got proposed to first would accept. But in my past life, Ethan proposed to me. Watching him give the bouquet to Lily, place the ring on her finger, and embrace her tightly with a radiant smile, I suddenly realized something. Ethan had been reborn too. Before I could figure out why he chose Lily in this life, Jason appeared with a bouquet. Seeing Ethan and Lily already locked in an embrace, Jason paused for a moment but quickly smiled, knelt before me and said, "Emma, I've had a crush on you for 8 years. Marry me. I promise to give you a good life." Sorry, we're not a good match. I rejected him without hesitation. Jason, despite his polished appearance and wealthy family, had a dark side I was all too familiar with. He had a first love who left him for the thrill of running away with a foreigner after being hurt. Jason no longer. In my previous life, he married Lily only to appease his family's pressure to settle down. Within 6 months, his first love returned after being abandoned. The two quickly rekindled their relationship. Soon after, Jason contracted a disease and passed it to Lily. He became a completely different person, resenting women and indulging in debauchery. Not long after, his family went bankrupt. Desperate for money, Jason tricked Lily into being sold to a dangerous operation. I knew that Jason intended to propose to Lily today because she was gentle and easier to manipulate. But seeing Ethan propose first, Jason's fragile ego prompted him to turn to me instead. To him, Lily and I were equally attractive and interchangeable for fulfilling his family's expectations. Jason probably didn't expect my rejection. His face briefly fell, but he quickly composed himself, forcing a faint polite smile. "Emma, I really like you and you know my temper. The woman I set my sights on will definitely become my wife." Hearing Jason's words, my heart tightened. The Clark family was at the height of its power. If Jason decided to leverage his family's influence, it would be nearly impossible for me to escape his grasp. Was I destined in this life to face the same tragic fate as Lily? I looked to Ethan for help. He was Jason's close friend and might be able to talk him out of this. But Ethan, who was standing with Lily in his arms, basking in his newfound happiness, only furrowed his brows slightly when he noticed my gaze. He then leaned Lily over to me. For a brief moment I thought Ethan might help me, given the bond we shared in our past life. But instead he said, "Emma, Jason really likes you. If you pass up on him, you'll never find a man as good as he is." Tears rolled uncontrollably down my face. Ethan knew exactly how Jason had treated Lily in our previous life. We had been husband and wife, yet he was so heartless, pushing me into this pit of fire. Heartbroken, I covered my face and ran away. But my worst fears soon came true. Early the next morning, Jason came straight to my house. "Sir, I want to marry Emma. Please give us your blessing," he said to my father. He handed over a gift list, and my father's eyes lit up as he read it. $800,000 in cash, a Rolls-Royce Phantom, and a lakeside villa worth $4.5 million. Jason emphasized that these gifts were tokens of his respect for my father, separate from my dowry, which he wouldn't require. My father, who had always been materialistic, clapped his hands with excitement, grinning from ear to ear. "My daughter is truly fortunate to have caught your eye, Mr. Clark. Don't worry, I'll make the final decision on this." "Jason, I've already told you we're not a good match. Stop pestering me. I don't want to contract your filthy disease, and I definitely don't want to end up being sold off like Lily." I stormed out of the house and snapped at Jason, determined to refuse him again. Before Jason could respond, my father shot me a sharp glare and immediately turned to Jason with an emphatic expression. Embarrassed, I smiled. "Mr. Clark, please don't mind her. My daughter doesn't know what's good for her. Let me talk to her and we'll work this out." Jason gave me an amused glance but didn't press further. Instead, he politely said, "Mr. Sue, I'll leave you and Emma to talk this over. I'll visit again soon." With that, he took his leave. The moment Jason left, my father slapped me hard across the face. "You idiot!" he yelled. The palpable force of his slap sent me sprawling to the ground, stunned. But even that didn't quench his fury. He jabbed his finger at my face and shouted, "Do you even understand what marrying Jason Clark means? It's a chance to move up in life. Don't you see that?" "Exactly," my younger brother chimed in, glaring at me. "The Clark family is one of the most powerful in the elite circle. If you marry Jason, not only will you live in luxury, but our entire family will benefit too. You can't be so selfish as to ignore Mom and Dad's happiness in their later years. You're such a fool." My mother spat venomously. "Jason Clark is asking for your hand in marriage. Do you know how lucky you are? Any sensible girl would have agreed immediately. And here you are telling him not to bother you. Do you want to drive me to my grave?" Tears streamed down my face as I stood there, feeling like the villain in my own family. It was as if refusing Jason made me the enemy of everyone I loved. I wanted to fight back, but under the weight of my parents' threats, my brother's accusations, and the suffocating guilt they piled onto me, I finally gave in. In the end, I agreed to marry Jason. The wedding was set for 1 month later. My wedding with Jason was scheduled for the same day as Ethan and Lily's. In my previous life, I married Ethan. This time I was marrying Jason. The reason I compromised was primarily because of Ethan. Ever since the day he proposed to Lily, Ethan hadn't reached out to me again. The man who used to warm my icy feet in his arms and make me brown sugar ginger tea when I had cramps seemed to have vanished, as if he truly died in my previous life. I suddenly remembered how in my past life, when Ethan found out that Lily had contracted a disease and was abandoned by Jason to await death, he spared no expense to gather dozens of top specialists to treat her. Later, when he learned that Lily had been tricked by Jason and sold to that hellish operation in Southeast Asia where she tragically died, Ethan locked himself in the bathroom and cried for 3 days and nights. He then used every connection he had to retrieve Lily's body and give her a proper burial. Looking back, it was clear Ethan had always loved Lily. I was nothing more than her substitute. That's why, after being reborn, Ethan rushed to propose to Lily, wanting to change her fate. He left me to take her place and face the tragedy that awaited. I accepted it. Setting Ethan aside, Lily had been genuinely good to me in our past life. We weren't just superficial friends. When she found out that Ethan and I couldn't even afford vegetarian Ian dumplings for New Year's dinner, she cried, scolding me for not telling her about my struggles. She then secretly gave me all the money she had saved up, helping Ethan and me restart our business and overcome that difficult time. Without Lily's help, Ethan and I wouldn't have had the chance to turn our lives around, and I wouldn't have become a wealthy wife. Since I had no chance to repay her kindness with money, I decided that in this life I would repay her through fate. Besides, with this rebirth advantage, I was confident that I wouldn't suffer the same tragic fate as Lily did in the previous life. When Lily learned that our weddings were on the same day, she excitedly sought me out and even brought Ethan and Jason along to discuss holding a joint wedding banquet at the same hotel. My palms instinctively tightened. Fortunately, Ethan and Jason didn't agree. The reason was simple. Ethan couldn't afford a grand wedding and had to keep things modest, while Jason's family was planning a lavish celebration. Lily was a little disappointed, but she didn't envy me for marrying into wealth. Instead, she gave me her heartfelt blessings in private. A month later, our weddings took place. Lily and Ethan moved into a small rented apartment, while I entered the grand estate of the Clark family. However, on the day of the wedding, something unexpected happened. Jason's first love, the woman he had never forgotten, returned from abroad earlier than anticipated. She arrived at the wedding with her long hair flowing and wearing a trench coat, standing at the entrance. She smiled sweetly and beckoned to Jason with a simple curl of her finger before turning and walking away. Jason, in front of our parents and all the guests, left me standing there in my wedding dress and chased after her like the wind. The power of a first love was terrifying, yet I neither cried nor caused a scene. Instead, I calmly turned to the guests and our parents and said, "I'm sorry, one of Jason's friends has an urgent matter that needs his attention. Please, everyone start the banquet without him." The guests, of course, understood what was going on, but many discreetly gave me thumbs up for my composure. Jason's parents praised me for my maturity, thankful that I didn't bring disgrace to the Clark family. I had learned an important lesson from Ethan in my previous life. No matter what happens, always stay composed. Crying and fighting solve nothing. When the guests finally left, I returned alone to the grand celebratory bridal suite. Sitting in the elaborately decorated room, tears finally began to fall. Tonight was also Ethan and Lily's wedding night. Their modest rented apartment might be small and simple, but that bed would surely be filled with the warmth and intimacy of their love. Ethan must have been overjoyed to finally make up for the regrets of his past life. But enough of this. I wasn't the type to wallow in self-pity. My fate had already changed upon being reborn. The most important thing now was to reset. I sit and fight against a tragic destiny, wiping away my tears. I lay down on the bed, thinking about Jason's first love returning. In a way, it was a good thing. At least I wouldn't have to constantly be on guard against him with her around. Jason wouldn't try to satisfy his desires with me. I could preserve both my dignity and my health with confidence. Thinking about this, I let out a small sigh of relief and drifted off into a fitful sleep. Jason didn't come home that night, and so I spent my wedding night alone in an empty room. Outsiders might pity me, but in truth I felt relieved. The next morning, I was woken by the sound of my in-laws scolding Jason. He had come home early that morning only to be harshly berated by his parents. Understanding that rules and etiquette were deeply ingrained in wealthy families, I decided to play the role of the obedient and sensible new daughter-in-law. I personally brewed 2 cups of tea and brought them to my in-laws as a gesture of respect. While I was at it, I said a few kind words in Jason's defense. "Emma is such a thoughtful girl," my father-in-law said, clearly on my side. "Even after you pulled such a disgraceful stunt, she still stood up for you. If I catch you going after that filthy woman again, I'll break your legs." Jason, looking guilty, glanced at me and quickly promised, "Dad, I'm sorry. I was wrong. From now on, I'll treat Emma well and be a proper husband." I thought Jason was just saying that to placate them and expected him to go back to being the superficial husband from my past life, sneaking off every night to be with his first love. But to my surprise, Jason truly changed. He stayed home and showered me with affection. One evening, I had a second helping of king crab at dinner. The next day, Jason had fresh crabs flown in from overseas just for me. When he found out I liked dumplings filled with chives and eggs, he went to a famous dumpling shop in the north to learn from the owner, and then made them by hand for me almost every night. He would prepare warm water for my foot baths himself. If I ever had a headache or felt unwell, he would stay by my side all night, refusing to sleep. Jason's pampering made even Ethan from my past life pale in comparison. There were moments when I almost started to fall for him. My in-laws, too, treated me like their own daughter. They even entrusted me with the Clark family's financial accounts. Looking at the incomprehensibly large numbers in the accounts and the daily influx of funds, I suddenly realized how insignificant Ethan's title as the richest man in my past life was. The wealth of an elite family like the Clarks was in a league of its own. Still, I didn't let Jason's affection cloud my judgment. I didn't understand why he was treating me so well, but I was clear-headed enough to know it was all fake. 3 months into our marriage, Jason still hadn't stayed out late, but we hadn't consummated the marriage. Every time we went to bed, he would apologize, claiming he was too tired from work. He pretended to fall asleep and snore on rare occasions when he felt guilty and tried to fulfill his duties as a husband. I would make an excuse saying it was that time of the month or that I wasn't feeling well. I didn't fully understand Jason, but I understood men. A man who could resist temptation at home was likely finding satisfaction elsewhere. This arrangement suited me fine. Maintaining a pure and distant relationship with Jason was exactly what I wanted. But that fragile balance was shattered by an anonymous text message. Tomorrow at 1 p.m., apartment 1313, Wealth Center Tower. I didn't know what this time and location meant, but I instinctively felt it had something to do with Jason. It wasn't hard to guess that this might be one of his secret hideouts. At first, I thought of ignoring it and continuing our superficial marriage, but then I remembered something important. In a few years, my in-laws would pass away unexpectedly, and Jason would take over the Clark family business. It wouldn't take long for him to squander the family fortune and reveal his true malicious nature, doing anything to turn profits, no matter how vile. I couldn't let that happen. I had to keep Jason in check. Determined, I waited until my in-laws were napping the next afternoon, then quietly slipped out of the Clark estate and made my way to Wealth Center Tower. Jason's Ferrari was parked in the lot, a clear sign he was there. After a moment's hesitation, I went upstairs and stood in front of apartment 1313. I knocked on the door, but no one answered. I tried turning the door handle, and to my surprise, the door opened. The room was empty. There was no sign of Jason. However, there was a set of surveillance equipment. I examined it closely and discovered it was connected to the neighboring apartment, 1314. After a moment of hesitation, I put on the headphones. Luna, just give me a little more time, okay? You know that Emma and I still aren't really a couple. Jason's voice came through the headphones. My heart sank instantly. The Luna Jason mentioned was none other than his first love, Luna-chan. It's been months already. How much longer are you going to keep me up in this dingy room? I'm not interested in being a mistress forever. Luna huffed in frustration. You go home every night and sleep in the same bed as her. She's so beautiful. Don't tell me you're not tempted. Luna, I swear I'm not interested in her at all. Jason quickly tried to pacify her. Besides, you exhaust me during the day. Even if I had any thoughts, I'm too drained to act on them at night. That's more like it. Luna laughed lightly, then sighed. But I'm tired of hiding here. We're the ones who are truly in love, so why do we have to sneak around? It makes me feel so small. Can't you speed things up? I can't wait to be your real wife. Luna, you know my plan is a little risky. If I leave any evidence behind, it could cost me my life. We need to take it slow, Jason explained. Besides, you know Emma is destined to be the scapegoat. In all this, until the plan is complete, I can't divorce her. But don't worry, just hold on a little longer. I promise I'll throw you the grandest wedding when the time comes. Fine, I guess I have no choice but to wait, Luna replied with a resigned sigh. Then her tone softened and she teased. But you still owe me something for today, don't you? Luna, didn't you say you weren't feeling well today? Not feeling well doesn't mean there aren't other ways, does it? You know so much, Jason. Luna giggled coyly. The sounds that followed made my entire body tremble. I sat down the headphones with shaking hands, my back cold with dread. It wasn't shock that I felt, but rather an overwhelming sense of sorrow for myself. 2 lifetimes and the men I married were more deceitful each time. In my past life, Ethan spent over a decade married to me, yet his heart belonged to Lily. In this life, Jason had dug a pit so deep for me that it would leave nothing of me behind. A surge of indignation cleared my mind. I didn't need further investigation to understand Jason's scheme. Every month, a substantial amount of money flowed into the Clark family accounts from Myanmar. I had once casually asked my father-in-law about it, and he brushed it off, claiming they had invested in a mine there. I didn't press further at the time, but now I knew better. The outwardly kind and satisfied in-laws who had entrusted me with managing the family accounts were not as straightforward as they seemed. Wealthy families like the Clarks harbor dark, bloody internal struggles, brothers turning against each other, fathers and sons becoming enemies, and constant backstabbing. It was just part of their world. In my past life, my in-laws' sudden and unexpected deaths likely had something to do with Jason. I wasn't entirely sure what Jason's ultimate plan was, but one thing was clear. I couldn't just sit back and let it unfold. I needed to start planning for myself. The surveillance equipment contained many recordings of Jay and Luna's conversations. After copying them, I carefully locked the door and left quietly. When I returned to the Clark estate, I made sure to prepare myself thoroughly. The next morning, I called Lily and suggested we meet up. She happily agreed, saying she'd wait for me at her home. After Lily married Ethan, her life didn't mirror the hardships I had endured in my previous life. This time, Ethan wasn't struggling in poverty like before. Using the advantage of his rebirth, he had already made some quick money. Although he hadn't cleared the $100 million debt yet, he had started working on a few highly profitable projects. Lily and Ethan's current lifestyle far exceeded that of an average family. They even managed to buy a small villa under Lily's name. When I saw Lily again, she looked even more radiant than before, her face glowing with happiness. I didn't envy her for taking Ethan from me. A kind and gentle woman like her deserved joy. "Oh, Mrs. Clark, I was starting to think you've forgotten about our friendship." After marrying into wealth, Lily teased me playfully the moment she saw me. I smiled. How could I? As soon as I had free time, I came to see you. In truth, we hadn't contacted each other since our weddings. It was an unspoken agreement. We both feared that staying in touch might cause unnecessary complications. After all, the relationships between the four of us were intertwined with hints of ambiguity. Avoiding contact was our way of keeping things safe. After chatting casually for a while, I got to the point. "Lily, I'd like to talk to Ethan." Lily froze for a moment, her expression turning slightly uneasy. She looked at me with a hint of nervousness. I quickly reassured her with a smile. "Don't worry, it's nothing like that. I just want to discuss some business cooperation with him." She let out a sigh of relief and waved her hand. "Emma, I didn't mean it that way," she said hesitantly. "After attending a few events with Ethan and meeting some of the other wealthy wives, I've realized how many rules these elite families have. It might look glamorous on the surface, but there's little warmth or sincerity. Sometimes I feel like I stole your happiness by marrying Ethan." I interrupted her before she could continue, worried that she might bring up memories of the sweet moments Ethan and I shared in my past life. "Don't worry about me, I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile and trying to appear calm. "Ethan's at work. I'll call him and ask him to come back," Lily offered, pulling out her phone without hesitation. When Ethan learned I wanted to see him, there was a brief silence on the other end of the line before he responded. "All right, I'll head home now." Less than 30 minutes later, Ethan arrived. Despite the time apart, he still exuded the same gentle and refined demeanor. Compared to the previous life, he now carried an aura of someone destined for greatness. We both hesitated, unsure of how to start, but exchanged a subtle smile and a nod as our way of greeting. "I'll go buy some groceries, you two can talk," Lily said, finding an excuse to leave us alone. Once it was just the two of us, I took a deep breath, my eyes fixed on him, and broke the silence. "The text, was it from you?" Ethan looked up at me sharply, a hint of surprise in his expression. After a moment, he nodded. "What exactly is Jason planning?" I asked, my voice steady but full of determination. I asked directly. The surveillance equipment in room 13113 must have been there for quite some time. This indicated that Ethan had been monitoring Jason for a while now. He must know a lot. Ethan's brows furrowed deeply, and after a moment of silence he said, "He wants to kill you." When he said this, I could see a clear trace of guilt in his eyes. So he really was a reborn person. Was it out of consideration for our past marriage that he was warning me? "Can you really bear to see me falsely accused of harming my in-laws and then being sold to Myanmar by Jason, only to die a tragic death?" I asked calmly, locking eyes with him. Ethan's body trembled, and he raked his hand through his hair in frustration. Then he looked directly at me and said, "No, I will protect you." I let out a bitter laugh. Protect me with what? If I'm out of the way, you won't have to worry about anyone ruining your happiness anymore. Emma, it's not what you think. Lily is too soft, too naive. She can't protect herself. But you're different. You're smart and… Ethan suddenly stood up, visibly agitated, but he stopped mid-sentence, unable to say what he truly wanted to. It was clear now he had realized I was reborn too. Someone as clever as Ethan figuring out my secret was inevitable. My eyes burned and I fought back tears. So this is the reason you abandoned me in this life and chose Lily instead. Ethan opened his mouth, but guilt overtook him, and he lowered his head, avoiding my gaze. I'm sorry, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. His silence confirmed his rebirth. After a long pause, Ethan admitted something else. Luna's early return was because I brought her back. I held back my tears and forced a smile. Forget it. What's done is done. I won't make things difficult for you, but what should I do next? I had already formulated a plan, but facing Ethan now, I reverted to the helpless woman I once was, seeking his guidance. Maybe it was because in my previous life I had grown accustomed to relying on him. I've already uncovered evidence of the Clark family's involvement in various illegal industries, Ethan said, his eyes firm. I'm collecting more proof to report it to the authorities. I've also discovered Jason's plan to harm his own parents, so he can take over the Clark family. It won't be long before their crimes are exposed and the family collapses. Once that happens, Emma, you'll be free. Ethan's tone was resolute, but I wasn't moved. I stared at him with a mix of anger and bitterness. And how long do I have to wait? Aren't you afraid I'll get caught up in their schemes in the meantime? Ethan froze at my words, his expression complicated. After some thought, he said, Emma, I trust you won't involve yourself in the Clark family's illegal activities. You're a righteous person, and it won't take more than 6 months for my plan to come to fruition. 6 months? His words praising my supposed righteousness only felt like mockery to me. I shook my head, rejecting his plan outright. I can't wait that long. From now on, you'll have to work with me, Emma. Ethan's head snapped up, his voice tinged with urgency. You don't understand. The Clark family's crimes are taking them down won't be that easy. It requires ample evidence and for them to turn on each other, father and son. That all takes time. I gave him a cold smile. By the time that happens, I'll probably already have been sold off to Myanmar by Jason. From now on, just follow my instructions, I said firmly. Ethan frowned deeply, still trying to persuade me, but I cut him off with a wave of my hand. In the next few days, you need to set up a new company overseas. Prepare to acquire all of the Clark family's legitimate businesses in a few months. You'll become the richest man on the charts. As for everything else, leave it to me. Emma, what are you planning to do? Ethan's eyes widened in alarm. I smiled faintly. At the very least, we were once husband and wife. I'm giving you a tiny head start on becoming the richest man. As for the Clark family, I'll bring them down myself, but there will be a new Sioux family rising in their place. Ethan's pupils contracted, his gaze filled with shock as if he no longer recognized me. He couldn't seem to comprehend how I could harbor such ambition. Even so, he hesitated. My tone, however, left no room for negotiation. Ethan, don't think I don't know you're not doing all of this for me, but to avenge the past life. If you cooperate with me, fine. If not, I'll handle it myself. Hearing this, Ethan lowered his head again, his guilt written all over his face as he avoided my gaze. I let out a soft scoff and left the house, what was once my home, without waiting for Lily to return. Heading back to the Clark estate, I went straight to the kitchen where I prepared a few of my signature dishes. Then I called Jason and told him I wanted to bring him lunch. Jason sounded flustered and at the same time slightly flattered. He hesitated before agreeing and told me to meet him at the Clark Group headquarters. When I showed up at his office for the first time, many employees were sneaking glances at me. When Jason arrived in a rush, I didn't say a word. I simply fed him lunch with my own hands. Once he had finished eating, it was almost time for him to clock out. I grabbed his arm and insisted he accompany me shopping. I deliberately chose the luxury commercial street near Wealth Center. Jason was clearly uneasy but had no way to refuse. I could feel Luna hiding in the shadows, her gaze filled with hatred and mockery. We stayed out until dark before I linked my arm through Jason's and returned to the Clark estate. The items I bought were all presented as gifts for my in-laws, who were so pleased that their faces lit up with joy. They even urged Jason and me to have a child soon. Over the next few days I repeated this routine. Even I was surprised by how convincing my performance was. I played the part of a gentle and virtuous wife in front of Jason and a considerate, sensible daughter-in-law in front of my in-laws. Of course, I had my reasons for putting on this act. As expected, Jason grew increasingly anxious while Luna became more restless and started pressuring him again. Jason, unable to stay composed, began to panic. It seemed he increased the dosage of medication for my in-laws as their health deteriorated rapidly. In just 10 days, they were bedridden. Jason, meanwhile, spent his days busy completing assignments for Luna. My in-laws, unable to handle family affairs themselves, were left with no choice but to seek someone to manage them. That's when I stepped in. Standing by their bedside, I declared assertively, "You two shouldn't worry about the business anymore. Focus on taking care of your health. What's most important now?" My in-laws exchanged a helpless glance, then reluctantly handed over some of the family business matters for me to manage. With every business I took over, Ethan and I operated in secret. We packaged and sold them using the Clark family's own money to buy them back under the name of the company Ethan and I had secretly established. Before long, most of the Clark family's legitimate businesses no longer belonged to the family. This wasn't a new tactic for me. In my past life, I had worked alongside Ethan to do the same. He had taught me every trick and I had grown adept at it. Back then, as husband and wife, we were a team working tirelessly to grow our business. The reality was you couldn't become the richest person without employing some shady methods or skirting the edges of legality. "Father-in-law, what's going on with these high-revenue businesses?" I asked, pressing him as he lay weakened and reliant on a ventilator. Realizing he was nearing the end, my father-in-law finally confessed everything about the Clark family's involvement in illegal industries. With a heavy heart, he said, "Daughter-in-law, Jason is unreliable. The Clark family will depend on you in the future." "All right," I lied smoothly, nodding as if I agreed. But there was no way I would uphold the Clark family's legacy. My goal was to bring it to its knees. It wasn't long before I got my hands on all the evidence of the Clark family's illegal activities. However, instead of handing it over to the authorities immediately, I went to Jason. It was time for the final step to push him over the edge. "Honey, you've been looking so pale lately. Let's go to the hospital for a full checkup," I suggested warmly. With a seemingly caring gesture, I brought Jason to the hospital. When his blood test results came back, it confirmed my suspicions. He was HIV positive. It was still in the early stages, so Jason hadn't noticed any symptoms yet. When Jason saw the report, his face turned ashen. His fists clenched so tightly that his nails dug into his palms. I delivered the final blow with a gentle tone. "Honey, have you donated blood recently? Or maybe someone tricked you into doing something you shouldn't have. But don't worry, even with this illness, you can live for years with proper treatment. I won't leave you. It's just such a pity that we won't be able to have children in the future." As I spoke, I let tears stream down my face, my expression filled with concern and heartbreak. I couldn't help but admire my own acting skills. Jason froze, his gaze flickering with guilt. For the first time, I saw genuine remorse in his eyes, but beneath that guilt was also simmering anger. Before he could say anything, I placed a finger on his lips. "Honey, you don't need to say anything. Let's just go home. From now on, focus on your treatment. I'll be here for you." Jason's eyes softened and he murmured, "Emma, today I finally realized that you're the one who truly loves me. I'm sorry." I shook my head gently, signaling that he didn't need to say anything more. As soon as we returned home from the hospital, the family doctor approached Jason with a grave expression and said 2 words, "My condolences." Jason froze in place. His parents had passed away. It was as if his entire world had collapsed. He stood silently for a long time before suddenly exploding like a lion in rage, with red eyes. He stormed out of the Clark estate. I didn't stop him, knowing full well that he was heading straight for Luna. Jason might have been infatuated with his first love, but he wasn't stupid. He knew exactly how he had contracted the disease. I deliberately took my time sending people out to monitor him and stall his actions. By the time Jason arrived at apartment 1314 in the Wealth Center, the scene was already set. Jason stood in the middle of the room, covered in blood, while Luna lay lifeless on the bed, barely resembling a human. The police arrived quickly and arrested Jason on the spot. After returning home, I anonymously sent all the evidence of the Clark family's involvement in illegal activities to the authorities. Following a thorough investigation, the police confirmed that I was completely innocent. The Clark family was finished. By the time other elite families in the circle moved to carve up the legitimate assets of the Clark family, it was too late. The entire family had already been reduced to an empty shell. "Emma, this belongs to you," Ethan said as we met at the rooftop restaurant overlooking the entire city. He handed me a report. I glanced at it, realizing my net worth had exceeded $1 trillion. This figure far surpassed anything listed on the richest person rankings. Ethan hadn't dared take even the slightest advantage. Every benefit I had promised him, he had refused to collect. He was afraid, terrified even. He never imagined that my methods would be so ruthless, able to destroy lives without staining my hands with blood. I smiled faintly and said nothing. He didn't understand. A woman who has lost all hope in love is left with only one thing: coldness. Ethan's eyes were filled with regret as he looked at me, but it was too late. "I need an assistant to help me manage my assets. You're a good fit. Monthly salary $5. Bonuses will depend on your performance. Are you in?" I asked casually, making it clear that I had no intention of letting him off. Ethan flinched but quickly bowed his head respectfully. "I'll do it." In the moment he bent down, I noticed the layer of cold sweat forming on his forehead and the fear flickering in his eyes. At that moment I was the queen, and Ethan was nothing more than a pawn. As Ethan straightened himself, I took one last sip of my wine, savoring the view of the city beneath us. The same city where I had once lived as a naive, hopeful woman believing in love, loyalty, and happily ever afters. That version of me had died long ago, replaced by someone who no longer needed the illusions of romance or companionship to define her worth. I stood up, adjusting my coat. "Ethan," I said, my tone cold. "I am authoritative. Don't forget you chose this. You chose to betray me in this life, and I won't allow you to rise above me ever again. Do your job well and you'll keep your dignity. Fail and I won't be so merciful." He nodded, his posture tense, his expression unreadable. "Understood," he replied quietly. As I walked away, I felt the weight of my choices settle into place. The world of the elite wasn't for the faint-hearted, and I had mastered the art of navigating it. I no longer craved love or validation. Instead, I craved power, control over my destiny, and a legacy that couldn't be dismantled by the whims of others. Months passed, and the Clark family became a distant memory, their name erased from the annals of high society. Jason's fate was sealed in prison, and Luna's name was forgotten, just like the shallow dream she had chased. Ethan worked under me diligently, his every move watched and measured. I saw the remorse in his eyes every time he glanced my way, but I didn't care. He had his chance and he threw it away. Now he would live in my shadow, paying for his mistakes one task at a time. As for me, I rebuilt my life not as a wife or a daughter-in-law, but as Emma Sue, the woman who rose from betrayal and heartbreak to claim her place at the top. My name became synonymous with strength, intelligence, and a fearsome resolve. And yet, in the quiet moments of my solitude, when the city lights reflected in my wine glass, I allowed myself one fleeting thought: if only Ethan had loved me the way I once loved him. But I brushed it aside, knowing that such weakness had no place in my life anymore. I had conquered my pain, my enemies, and my past. The only thing left now was to enjoy the empire I had built, and ensure no one could ever take it away from me. And so I walked forward into the future, my heels clicking against the marble floor, the sound a steady reminder of who I had become. A queen without a king, and perfectly content to remain that way.